The room buzzed with polished confidence, but when I reached for my name tag at the check-in table, a ripple of laughter cut through the air. I hadn't even stepped past the desk. A woman in a sleek red blazer handed me my badge, glanced at it, then looked up with a quick, tight smile, the kind that hides amusement but betrays it in the eyes. My chest went cold as I read the words, Zia Keller, single mom, unemployed. I stood still, staring. I hadn't written that when I RSVP'd to this event. I'd listed my background: software engineer, system architect, contributor to several open-source projects. I'd even attached links. This wasn't an error. This was intentional. Someone had made a joke out of me. Behind me, 2 women giggled, one whispering just loud enough. Why would they even include people like that? The other responded with a half laugh. Must be a diversity push. My hands shook slightly, but I forced a smile and walked inside. The event was held in one of those glass conference rooms overlooking the city. Light poured in through tall windows, reflecting off gold accents and crystal pitchers of cucumber water. Everyone looked perfect. Tailored dresses, pointed heels, confident body language. I found a spot along the back wall, away from the tables, pretending I was just waiting for someone. I wasn't. I had come alone. The panel was titled Women Building the Future, and I had been excited, maybe even a little proud, when I first got the invitation. After years of working in isolation, caring for my son while coding through the night, I thought maybe someone finally saw me. Maybe it was my turn to be part of the conversation. But now I was background noise, a mistake, a joke. The first speaker took the stage, a founder of a beauty tech brand. She thanked everyone, talked about manifesting abundance, and made a passing comment about how you have to filter out the people who bring the energy down. Her eyes flicked toward the back of the room. I wondered if I was the energy she meant. I touched the name tag, still pinned to my jacket. My throat burned. I thought about leaving. I could slip out quietly. No one would notice. I could go home to Eli, heat up leftovers, and try to forget this ever happened. But then the host walked onto the stage. Marcus Vail. I recognized him from photos, a quiet giant in tech, co-founder of several platforms, rarely in the spotlight, but known for backing underdogs. He wasn't smiling like the rest. His expression was unreadable, serious. He stepped to the mic and looked out over the room. "Before we close," he said, voice calm, deliberate, "there's one more speaker." Everyone looked around, confused. The printed agenda was done. The event was supposed to end with a group photo. "She's not sitting at the front. In fact, she's been standing in the back of the room while you've laughed." That made people shift in their seats. I felt a flush rise up my neck. My heartbeat pulsed in my ears. "She built something every one of you uses, whether you know it or not, something you depend on every single day." My breath caught. Her name is Zia Keller. And in that instant, the entire room went silent. Every head turned toward the back, toward me. Before the panel, before the name tag, before the silence fell over that glossy room, I was just trying to survive. I used to be a software engineer. That feels like a lifetime ago now. I built systems, wrote clean code, led development teams. I loved it. I was good at it. But the world doesn't slow down when life knocks you flat, and it doesn't wait when you're a woman trying to climb back up. My mother got sick 5 years ago, pancreatic cancer. It moved fast. One day she was helping Eli with his science fair volcano, and a few months later I was holding her hand in hospice while her body gave up. I left my job to take care of her. No one else could, and I don't regret it, not one bit. But when she was gone, so was everything I'd built. My savings, my momentum, my place in the industry. Gone. I applied to dozens of jobs after she passed. I had a resume full of experience, but the interviews were brutal. They didn't care why I had stepped away. They saw a gap. They saw single mom. They saw rusty skills. One recruiter actually said to me, "You're impressive, but we're looking for someone a little more current, like I was expired milk." So I stopped trying to fit back into their world. Instead, I built something of my own. From a corner of my small apartment with Eli doing his homework across the table, I started working on a modular framework for real-time data environments. It was quiet, thankless work. No investors, no co-founders, no press releases. Just me and my laptop. I called it K-Stack. Clean, scalable, open source. I released it under a pseudonym and kept updating it in the shadows while doing temp gigs and weekend cleaning jobs to keep the lights on. No one knew it was mine, but I knew. I'd track every download, watch the traffic rise. I saw big names using it. Startups, mid-sized companies, even one of the apps that hosted the panel I was later invited to. My code was everywhere. Still, no one knew my name. I was invisible again, but this time my work was not. The only person who truly saw me was my son, Eli. 10 years old, all heart, sharp as a blade. He never once looked at me like I was failing. "Mom, you're a builder," he told me one night as I was fixing a broken function. "I just build from scratch because nobody's hiring," I said. "That's even cooler," he said. "You're like Iron Man without the suit." I laughed, but there was something in me that stung too. I didn't want to be Iron Man, I just wanted to be seen. I wanted to walk into a room and not feel like I had to explain every inch of my worth. Then came the invitation, a women's success panel hosted by one of the very platforms built on K-Stack. The email was polished and enthusiastic, celebrating women who build the future, it said. I read it twice, 3 times. Maybe someone had connected the dots. Maybe this was it, the moment the work I'd done in the shadows finally brought me into the light. I spent hours getting ready. My clothes weren't new, but I pressed them carefully. I straightened my hair, fixed my makeup. I didn't have a sitter, so I dropped Eli off at my neighbor's house and promised to tell him everything when I got back. "You're going to crush it," he said, smiling wide. "Let's hope they see me," I whispered. "They will. You're the smartest person there." I arrived early, heart pounding with hope. I checked in, I smiled, and then they handed me that name tag, Single Mom, Unemployed. All the air left my chest. I stood there, frozen, gripping that small piece of plastic like it had punched me in the stomach. Was it a joke? A mistake? I don't know which would have been worse. I walked into that room not as a guest, not as a speaker, but as the punchline. Every moment of pride I'd carried with me felt smaller. I could still hear Eli's voice in my head, cheering me on, and I hated how that made me want to cry. I wanted to leave right then. I wanted to rip off the tag and disappear. But I didn't. I stood in the back of that room, quiet, still, and humiliated. And somehow, that was the moment everything began to shift. Because what no one in that room knew was that I had built the foundation they were standing on. They didn't see it yet, but they were about to. I stayed because of Eli. That's the truth. If it had just been me, I would have walked out the moment I saw that name tag. But I kept thinking about the way he looked at me that morning, proud and full of belief. He thought I belonged there, so I stayed for him, for the tiny part of me that wanted to believe it too. But the second I stepped into the room, I realized just how far I didn't belong. The tables were laid out in perfect circles, white linens, gold chairs, name cards with job titles like founder, chief innovation officer, investor. Women in elegant jumpsuits were sipping sparkling water with cucumber slices, passing business cards, laughing in perfect sync. I didn't have a table. I wasn't on the seating chart. There was no place set for me, so I stood in the back, near the catering station, out of the way like an afterthought. One of the volunteers glanced at my badge and gave a polite nod, the kind you give to someone working the event, not attending it. I tried to blend in. I kept quiet, but I could feel the eyes on me. I watched the first panel begin. 4 women on stage, each with their own microphone, talking about disruption, scaling, personal brands. One of them, a woman in a sharp navy pantsuit, said something that made the room laugh. "We all started from nothing. Well, except for the people who are still there." The audience cracked up. I stood still, unsure if I imagined the way a few heads turned slightly in my direction. The laughter echoed louder than it should have. I didn't belong here. That message was written in the way no one spoke to me, in how the servers moved around me but never made eye contact, in how every woman at every table looked through me like I was furniture. One even asked, "Can you bring more napkins?" before realizing I wasn't staff. No apology, just silence. Then came the networking break. This was supposed to be the moment I would casually mention KS Stack, see a spark of recognition, maybe even hear someone say, "Wait, you built that?" I had imagined it on the subway ride over. I had practiced the lines in my head. Instead, I stood in the corner, holding a paper plate of fruit I didn't want to eat, while people mingled and reconnected. Did you see that woman's badge? Single mom and unemployed. Brave of them to invite someone like that. Or maybe they just needed to fill a quota. They didn't say it to me, but they didn't have to. Whispers are always loud when you're the one they're about. I touched the name tag again, still pinned to my chest. I had considered peeling it off, tossing it in the trash, but something kept me from doing it. Maybe defiance, maybe pride, maybe spite. I didn't know yet. What I did know was that the badge wasn't wrong. I was a single mom. I was unemployed, at least in the way they measured employment. But none of that made me a joke. Still, I felt like one. I thought about Eli again. I pictured him sitting on the couch, legs curled under him, waiting for me to come home and tell him how it went. I wanted to lie to him, tell him they loved me, tell him they saw me. I stepped toward the exit. I was done. But then I heard someone clear their throat behind the podium. I turned and saw him. Marcus Vale, the host, the man who'd sent the invitation, the one person in the room who hadn't spoken all day. He looked older than his pictures, serious, still. He stepped up to the microphone while the audience was settling back into their chairs. "Before we wrap," he said, "there's one more speaker we haven't heard from yet." I paused. The crowd rustled. People looked confused. One of the panelists leaned toward another and whispered, "This wasn't on the schedule." Marcus continued, "She's not on your programs. She's not at your tables. She's been standing in the back while you've shared your success stories. But the truth is, many of you are here because of her work." My pulse began to rise. You just didn't know it was hers. I stared at him. My plate shook in my hand. I felt the ground tilt just slightly beneath me. "Her name is Zia Keller." My name hit the room like a stone dropped in water. The woman in red turned to me slowly. A few jaws dropped. The same people who had been laughing 10 minutes ago were now looking around, trying to figure out what they missed. I couldn't breathe. And that's when I realized the spotlight was finally on me. For a moment, everything froze. My brain scrambled to catch up with what Marcus had just said. He had called my name. He had called me a speaker. And not just a speaker, he said they depended on my work. In front of everyone, loud enough for every single person who laughed at my name tag to hear it. All those whispers, all that dismissal. Now the air felt heavier, sharper, as if the entire room had been yanked out of its polished comfort and dropped into something real. I looked down at my shoes, scuffed at the toes, not exactly keynote ready, then at my hands, still holding that half-full paper plate of grapes. I placed it quietly on a tray behind me. My heart was slamming against my ribs, but my feet began to move. I didn't plan to walk toward that stage. My body just did it. Every step cut through silence. Conversations died mid-sentence. I could feel the heat of people staring, some in confusion, others in sudden guilt. The women who had laughed earlier now looked unsure, eyes darting between me and Marcus. One of them even clapped, a few slow, hesitant pats that died off quickly. No one followed. When I reached the front, Marcus stepped aside. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. He just handed me the mic, nodded once, and let me stand there. Alone, fully seen. I took a breath. I had no slides, no speech, nothing prepared. But I had a story. And for the first time, I knew it mattered. "Good afternoon," I said. My voice cracked, but I didn't flinch. "You probably read my name tag and thought you knew who I was. And I get it. Single mom, unemployed doesn't exactly scream keynote material." A ripple of laughter broke out, nervous, defensive. I let it hang for a beat. But labels are funny things. They're easy to read and even easier to misunderstand. I scanned the room. All eyes on me now, not laughing, not whispering, listening. I was a software engineer. I left my job to take care of my dying mother. When she passed, I tried to return to tech, but the industry had already moved on without me. A woman in the front blinked hard, shifting in her chair. So I started building again, quietly, nights, weekends, between school pickups and cleaning jobs. I wasn't getting paid, I wasn't getting promoted, I wasn't even getting noticed. But I kept coding, and I built something called KStack. The moment I said the name, I saw it happen. Eyes widened, shoulders straightened, recognition. Some people knew. I'd seen the download logs. I knew which companies were using it. KStack powers real-time environments across dozens of platforms, including one of the apps that organize this very panel. You've probably used it today. You just didn't know it was mine. That line landed hard. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. But I wasn't soft either. I wanted them to understand what it felt like to be erased, to be laughed at while carrying something powerful and real. And I wanted them to know I wasn't here because someone handed me a chance. I had built my way back, alone. I didn't come here to make you uncomfortable, I continued. I came because for years I worked in silence while others took up space I couldn't access. And now, for the first time, I've been invited to take that space. So I'm going to take it. That last sentence hit like a chord. People shifted again, but this time it wasn't awkward. It was reverent. A few heads nodded slowly. One woman in the third row mouthed something that looked like, "Wow." I ended with this. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. Brilliance doesn't always come in polished packaging, talent doesn't always have a title, and sometimes the person you're ignoring is the one who built the very thing you're standing on. When I stepped back, I didn't expect applause, but it came. First a few claps, then more, then all at once. I didn't smile, not right away. I just stood there and breathed. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. I was undeniable. When the applause started, I didn't trust it. I'd spent so long building in silence, being overlooked, dismissed, ignored, that hearing a room full of successful, polished women clapping for me felt unreal, like I'd stepped out of my body and into someone else's life. But it was happening. Their hands were moving. The sound was real. Some stood. A few even looked shaken, not because they pitied me, but because they finally understood who I was. I scanned the crowd. Some were clapping hard, heads nodding in approval. Some clapped softly, unsure how to respond to the woman they had just mocked. Others avoided my eyes altogether. And in the middle of it all, Marcus stood with his arms folded, watching me, not with pride, but respect. The kind you earn, the kind no one can give you or take away. I stepped back from the mic. Someone, maybe the moderator, asked if I'd stay for a Q&A. I nodded. I wasn't afraid anymore. Whatever fear had gripped me when I walked into that room had burned away. "How did no one know it was you?" a woman in the front asked, her voice thick with disbelief. "Because I never attached my name to the framework," I said. I didn't think anyone would take it seriously if they knew it came from a single mom with no funding, no team, and no connections. Another woman raised her hand. "Have companies been profiting from your work without credit?" "Yes," I said, "but I let them because at the time survival mattered more than recognition." There was a pause. A woman near the back, older with silver-streaked braids and a sharp voice, spoke up. "What are you going to do now?" And that was the question, wasn't it? Because everything had changed in the space of 10 minutes. I wasn't invisible anymore. My name was now tied to something powerful. There was no going back. "I'm going to build something for women like me," I said. "For women who were told their time had passed. For those who had to step away, take care of family, survive life, and now feel like the world moved on without them. I'm not asking to sit at your tables anymore. I'm building my own." That line landed hard. One woman near the stage put a hand over her chest. Another wiped away a tear. I wasn't trying to make them cry. I was just speaking the truth, a truth I had buried for too long. After the session ended, people came up to me, slowly, awkwardly, but genuinely. "Zia, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. Your story hit me, really hit me. Do you need funding? I have contacts. I'd love to collaborate." were using K-Stack and had no idea. I smiled. I thanked them. I let them speak. But I wasn't chasing their validation anymore. I wasn't hoping they'd invite me in because I was already in. The moment that proved it came when I stepped outside for a breath of fresh air and checked my phone. A notification blinked. K-Stack featured on Product Sphere. Trending. Downloads spiking. Then another. Zia Keller, the hidden genius behind K-Stack. And another. Marcus Vail tweets, "There are women in tech whose names you've never heard. Today, I heard one that will echo for a long time." I stared at the screen, heart pounding, hand over my mouth. The world was waking up, and this time, they were using my name. When I got home, Eli was on the couch in his pajamas, eating cereal straight from the box. He jumped up the second I walked in. "How'd it go? Did they love you?" I sat down, pulled him close, and whispered, "They finally saw me." "Told you," he grinned. "Your iron mom." I laughed, full and deep, for the first time in what felt like years. Not because I needed to release something, but because I finally felt whole. That night, after Eli went to bed, I opened my laptop, not to code, not to fix bugs or respond to questions, but to register a domain name, kellercollective.tech. I had stories to tell, women to find, tables to build, and this time, it was going to have room for all of us. In the weeks after the panel, everything changed, and yet so much stayed the same. I still woke up early to pack Eli's lunch. I still walked past the same corner coffee shop. I still typed code from the same seat at the kitchen table, the paint chipped at the edge where my mother used to rest her elbows. Life didn't suddenly become glossy and perfect. It just finally felt like mine. But now, people were listening. Emails flooded in. Some were apologies. Some were job offers. Some were confessions from women who said, "I thought I was the only one." They weren't. None of us were. I turned down most of the offers, not because I didn't need the money. Believe me, I did. But because something in me had shifted the moment I stepped off that stage. I didn't want to plug into someone else's machine. I wanted to build one of my own. So I did. The Keller Collective started as an idea on a napkin. A network, a hub, a launch pad for women who were brilliant, experienced, and entirely overlooked. Women who had gaps in their resumes because life had required their presence elsewhere. Mothers, caregivers, survivors, star coders who had been pushed to the sidelines because the tech world still measures value in buzzwords and Ivy League credentials. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I was just opening the door I had needed 5 years ago. I built a team, slowly, carefully. Some were women I'd met at that very panel, who later told me they felt ashamed for not noticing me sooner. Others were total strangers, sending midnight emails that began, "I saw your story and I cried." We hosted our first workshop from a rented community center with folding chairs and slow Wi-Fi, but the room was electric. Women showed up not for resumes or name tags, but for each other. They brought their babies, their laptops, their hopes. We weren't polished, but we were powerful. And through it all, Eli was there, watching me, cheering me on, growing into a young man who knew exactly what it looked like when a woman takes back her name. One night, months later, I tucked him into bed after helping with his math homework. As I stood to leave, he said, "Hey, Mom." "Yeah? Are you famous now?" I smiled. "Not really, but I think people finally understand what I do." "Well, I always did." "I know, baby. That's what got me through." And it was true. Through every lonely night, every silent launch, every closed door, Eli had been my mirror, reflecting back the truth I couldn't see myself. Here's the thing no one tells you about being underestimated. It hurts, not just because people ignore you, but because after a while, you start to ignore yourself too. You shrink, you second guess, you swallow your brilliance and call it humility. But standing on that stage, with a plastic name tag still pinned crooked on my chest, I finally understood something. Power doesn't always come from being seen. Sometimes it's forged in the shadows, the pain, the rejection, the silence. They didn't break me. They built me. Every door slammed in my face pushed me to create my own. Every time I was told not now, I wrote another line of code. Every laugh behind my back became fuel. Now I make sure no woman has to wait for someone else to see her value. We teach them to build, to launch, to speak, to take up space without apologizing. At our latest event, someone asked me what success looks like. I thought for a second, then told her, "Success looks like freedom. It looks like knowing your worth before anyone else says it out loud. It looks like walking into a room that wasn't built for you and deciding to stay anyway, not because they let you in, but because you belong." So yeah, maybe I walked into that panel as a joke, but I walked out as a force, and I'm just getting started. So if you've ever been overlooked, if you've ever walked into a room and felt like you weren't supposed to be there, if they ever tried to reduce you to a label, a title, or a joke, just remember, you don't need anyone's permission to be powerful. You don't need a seat at their table if you know how to build your own. Because sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the one who's already changed it. If this story hit home for you, if it made you feel seen or reminded you of your own worth, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs it, and drop a comment below. I read every single one. Tell me your story. Tell me what you've built in silence. Let's lift each other up in the comments the same way we should be lifted in every room we walk into. And if you want more stories like this, raw, real, and unfiltered, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This channel is a space for underdogs, dreamers, builders, and believers. We're just getting started. Thanks for watching. I'm Zia Keller, and I'll see you in the next one.